Kerrigan had gifted her to the king when she was 11 years old, and she's now realizing that the whole time Gideon has been a spy. And so this episode opens with a flashback of Kerrigan, so you get some backstory on him and why, and how he created the fold. So it opens with him. He's on horseback. He's en route to a cabin in the woods, and this is when we're introduced to Luda. Luda is a Grisha who's a healer, and he's clearly in love with her. So the king's soldiers are after him, and he's trying to get to her to get her to safety. So, they talked for a while, and, they talked about the amplifier, because he's immortal, even though she's a Grisha, she's not. And she's saying that if she's able to get an amplifier, that it will give her maybe another 100 years, maybe more.
I could live a long life. With training, with an amplifier, I could see another 100 years. Maybe more.
And he's saying that, but you're still mortal. So he's basically, eventually you're going to die. But at this point, they're trying to pack up whatever they can. But of course, the soldiers get there. He ends up going out to talk to them. And she stays in the house. And they basically say the king wants us to bring you back. But he didn't say anything about you being alive.
I don't want to hurt you.
And so at this point, they're trying to kill this man. The only reason he's survived is because, but if he's immortal, why would he need a healer? Okay, anyway, but Luda is inside, and she's using her powers to heal him, which is why he, after they shot him a couple of times with the arrow, he was able to pull the arrows out. Again, he's supposed to be immortal. Okay. Anywho, eventually, they get the drop on her. Apparently, they came in through another entrance in the cabin, and they end up dragging her out. So at this point, she's no longer able to use her powers to heal him. They're basically saying, basically, you need to come with us, because at this point, she is, she can't help you anymore. So basically, the next shot can be your last.
Here's the little witch who's been stitching him back together.
Sorry.
And they talk a little bit more. They put these shackles of some sort on him so he can't use his powers. And because their powers, they have to use their hands in order to manifest their powers. And so, they had Luda, they're talking to him, taunting him, and eventually they end up stabbing Luda.
No! No!
Which, of course, he's now able to break these shackles and use his powers, and he kills all of them. He could have killed all of them before. And, before they stabbed Luda, but this is how the story goes. So, Kerrigan, he makes it back to, I forget whatever their hiding place was. And, they didn't have a healer. Luda was their healer, so they were expecting her to come back. And so, his mother is there, Bagra, and she is sick. Again, they're supposed to be immortal, but they're still having they're supposed to be immortal, but they're having these very mortal, infliction. I mean, she looked like she was sick and weak. Anywho, so he go in to talk to her, and she talked about how the king is afraid of him, and he's talking about how he won a war for them, and yes, and you started a war for us, and she was the one that told him he should leave and wait for the king to die and come back with a new identity.
Go, flee, go west, go to Kurt, wait for the king to die. Then return with a new name.
And then he started talking about, the guy who created the amplifiers and how he could use their powers to create the army.
I mean, make an army. Well, it's over, did it?
And so this was a conversation he had with her. She knew what he had planned. And of course, she was like, we can't do that. We do magic on a smaller scale. We don't have the power to, to do that. We're not able to control it. And he was determined that this is what was going to happen. And so he did. And so they show him creating the fold. And he got his mother out, but all the rest of the, the soldiers that were outside and the Grishas that were inside, we're assuming that those are the Valkyr, the people that, turned into these monsters that are now, killing folk, in the fold. So, There's a quick scene between Jesper, Inez, and Kaz. Inez is still injured. She's, still trying to patch herself up. They're counting, looking at their coins. They're like, okay, we low on funds. And they were like, well, what are we going to do? And Kaz was like, we need to go back to Ketterdam, which is where they live.
Between our dwindling funds, lack of time, and conflicting interests, it's time we cut our losses.
He left, and so Jesper and Inez were there. Jesper stayed with her while she was patching herself up. And she was saying how she can't go back. And he was saying that she was basically saying that he thought that she meant that she couldn't go back to Helena. She was like, no, I can't go back. And he ends up saying, I would tell you to trust Kaz, but at the same time, I don't have the right to tell you what you need to do, what you should do with your chance at freedom.
I was going to tell you to trust Kaz. I don't have the right to tell you what you should do with your shot at freedom.
Now, keep in mind, Inez is fully aware that Helena holds the deed to the Crown Club, and if she doesn't go back, then they're going to lose the club. The thing is, Jesper isn't aware of this yet, so we're assuming that that's why he said that he doesn't know what's at stake, really. He do in terms of his friend, but not in terms of their livelihood when they get back to Ketterdam. So we flash them all, and Alina, they are now at, I guess, the location where he saw the stag, and they're talking. And they make a joke, right? She's basically telling him that she has to be the one to kill the stag, because, of course, the person that kills the stag is the only person that could absorb the powers. And then he was, telling her how much of a crappy shot she is, and they kind of laughed a little bit.
Now, let me find the stag. I need to be one to kill it.
You're a terrible shot. They made you cartographer for a reason.
And the stag appeared, and he lined up the shot for her. She was about to take the shot. And then she thought about something about how Kerrigan was, he really didn't say too much about teaching her how to absorb the powers, and maybe there's another way.
Kerrigan didn't want me to have an amplifier. So he didn't teach me about this. Maybe there's another way to do this.
And she didn't want to kill the animal. She thought that she could find a way to, absorb the powers without killing the stag. And so, she walks over to it, and, then there's this beam of light, and the next thing you know, the stag is shot. Kerrigan and his men have arrived. They've shot Maul. Maul is now injured again. He's at this point where he's bleeding out. He's about to die. Kerrigan is telling her that he would have his healer heal Maul, but he wants the stag. And initially she was trying to protect the stag, and even Maul was telling her to kill the stag so she can get the power. And she chose Maul over the stag. And so she went to help Maul, and Kerrigan killed the stag. No! Now he did, in the end, keep his word, and his healer did heal Maul. But it's like, girl, there's a lot more at stake. I get that's your homie, your future lover, and that whole thing, your homie, lover, friend, but there's a lot more at stake, and now Kerrigan has this power. So Inez went out to talk to Kaz, and of course he was like, well, are you coming to say goodbye?
Are you hungry, or just saying goodbye?
And her response was, no, is that all you have to say? Now, it's obvious that Kaz and Inez have feelings for each other, but they're both too cowardly. I don't know what it is. They don't just want to admit it and come out and say it. I don't know why, because it's obvious the way they look at each other. It's obvious the way they speak to each other. It's obvious the way they, put their lives on the line, risk their lives for each other. But they go through this whole song and dance. And so he was like, well, what's left to say? And so she turned to walk away. And then he had to admit that she was right about this sun summoner. And she was like, so now do Kaz believe in the saints? And he, of course, was like, don't be ridiculous. I believe that, she's just a Grisha who can control light. Like, he wasn't trying to put all, she felt like Inez was putting 20 on 10. It's like, no, I'm not saying all that. I'm just saying that she can manipulate light.
Hardly.
Because you just said that.
I said Alina Starkov is a Grisha with the power to manipulate light.
And so she was like, well, if you don't believe in the saints, what do you believe in? And then he was like, myself and you and Jesper. And then he referred to them as his crows. And so she was like, oh, birds of prey or something to that effect. And he said, no, crows don't only remember the people that wronged them. They also remember the people that were kind to them.
Crows don't just remember the faces of people who wronged them. They also remember those who are kind.
And he was basically saying that how a saint has never watched over him, not as well as she has over the years. And so I guess that's about as close as, we're going to get to him saying, at this point, saying that he loves her. So, I don't know.
No saint ever watched over me. Not like you have.
And then, of course, he, promised her that she would not have to go back to Alina. So, at this point, she has decided to stay. So, we have the scene with Kirigan and Alina. David has made some collar or something to put on Alina. And so, they're talking. She's talking with Kirigan, and he's basically saying how, what's more powerful than them. Each of them is them being powerful together.
You know the only thing more powerful than you or me. The two of us. Together.
And her response was, are we going to destroy the fold? And he was like, we can do whatever you want.
Are we destroying the fold?
We can do anything.
And David ends up putting this collar on her. And then he ends up, it wasn't necessarily a transfer of power. It was basically he could tap into her powers. So this collar that he put on her basically gives Kirigan access to her powers. So I'm just looking at this like, girl, you just went on and killed that damn stag and got the power. I'm just...
You should now have full access to all of her life.
So they arrive at the camp, and Alina, she's in the tent trying to figure out like what's going to happen, because at this point this collar is now like has embedded itself in her skin, so it's not like something she could just take off. And so Genya arrives, and so she was so excited to see her, like, oh my God, we need to talk to the king. And, Genya's telling that the king is sick and the queen has been quarantined. And now things are starting to make sense to her. She now realizes that she remembered Genya telling her that, that Kirigan had gifted her to the king when she was 11 years old. And she's now realizing that the whole time Genya has been a spy.
You said Kirigan gifted you to the queen when you were 11. You were a spy for him.
And basically Alina is hurt because she felt like she had a friendship with this woman, and this woman was spying on her the whole time. And now she's realizing about the whole situation with the letters, how Genya was never sending out the letters.
My letters to Mal. You never sent them.
Genya basically said that she was in a situation where her back was against the wall, and she didn't have the luxury of putting friendship over survival.
Choosing friendship over survival was not a luxury I could afford.
And of course, Alina was like, I've been in many situations where, I've had to make tough decisions, and I never, basically betrayed my friends. And she talked about, the situation with the king and how, he basically took advantage of her sexually. And while Alina could feel bad for her, and she even told her that, your vengeance against the king was justified, but your trust in Kirigan is not, he's not trustworthy. And Genya sees herself as a soldier, and basically Alina was telling her that no, he's using everybody. Like, this is all for his own gain and gratification. He really doesn't care about anyone.
We are his pawns. Nothing more.
So we flash to a scene with Kaz, Inej, and Jesper. They're talking about how they're going to get back to Ketterdam. And there was it was just a brief episode where they went back to, I guess, to see if they could get back on the train, to see if they could figure that out. But then they saw the people blow the train up. And so now they're here trying to figure out how they're going to get across. And Cass is saying that the general is planning a crossing. And they're going to rattle with them.
Orders from the Black General. He plans to cross on it tomorrow.
And of course, Jesper's like, well, wait a minute. All these people know how we look. How are we just going to sneak on board? And they're like, you know, they're kind of looking at Cass like, you got something up your sleeve. But Cass is like, no, actually, Inez was like, this was your plan the whole time. Basically, to have Kiergan find her so that you could take her from Kiergan.
Was this your plan all along? To have the general get her back so you can take her again?
He was like, well, no, my plan is for us to get across the fold. But you could just tell just by his facial expression, look in his eyes, like he got something up his sleeve, right? And so now their plan is to dress the part, I guess, as dignitaries or pose as soldiers or something so they can get across. They can hitch a ride or blend in with the crowd. So Kiergan went to talk to Maul. And of course, you know how, you know, they're going back and forth about Alina, and, you know, Kiergan is like, you know, I know that you care a lot about her. She cares a lot about you. And then he admitted to reading the letters. And he started telling Maul about how he never really appreciated who Alina really was. And I'm like, well, of course he always loved Alina. How could he appreciate her for something she didn't even know she was? But anywho.
I read your letters. All these years, you never truly appreciated who she is.
And Maul basically told him that, you know, it's never going to work. She's never going to love you. She's never going to forgive you for betraying her and, you know, the whole thing.
Oh, you have no chance. Shut up, man.
And Kiergan ends up going into, because he's immortal, he's like, you know, the thing that I have on my side is time. You know, I have all the time in the world to change her mind, to change her heart. You know, to wait for her to forgive me and all that. You know, while that's happening, you're going to grow old, because I guess now that they're linked in some way, so now she's now immortal, or I don't know if she was always immortal because she had this power. I'm not sure how that worked, but anywho, he's basically telling Maul that you're going to grow old and you're going to die. And he basically said that I don't, you know, there's no reason for me to kill you. I don't have to. Basically, you know, you're here for a finite amount of time, and then, you know, I never have to worry about you again. So really, there's no point in me even killing you.
I'm not going to kill you. No. I don't need to.
And he walked away. And so, because at this point, Maul is chained up, so he's basically treating him like he's a prisoner. So he walked away, and, you know, eventually Maul escaped. So now he's out there. So Kiergan goes in and talks to Alina, and he's talking about the diplomats that, you know, going to be doing this crossing, and she basically said that she's willing to, you know, go along with whatever he has planned as long as he let Mal go.
There will be foreign diplomats on this crossing of the forest.
You want me to play along with the demonstration? We will release Mal.
And then he kind of was, you know, he kind of brushed it off as like, I just want to talk to you, and he starts on his, you know, his mess again about how they're gonna do great things together, and she basically told him that she didn't believe anything that he says, and she ends up telling him that she knows that he's the Black Heretic.
About the Black Heretic. You spun all this guilt around your burden, sins of your father.
And he makes he's the cause of all of this, and that, you know, she could have saved Grisha, she could have saved everyone, but he never gave her the chance, and he did, you know, perhaps, and, you know, his whole bullshittery.
I could have made Grisha safe, but you never gave me a choice.
And he's basically saying that, you know, you can't do this on your own, and neither can I. And he's still trying to, I guess, woo her and all this kind of craziness. And she basically told him that all he cares about is winning. Like, he doesn't care who suffers. All he cares about is himself and winning.
You don't care who suffers, as long as you win.
And at the point, he realized he wasn't going to win her over, and he ended up leaving when he left the tent. So, and no sooner than he left the tent, the guard ran over to tell him that Maul escaped. And he basically was like, you know what, he really would care too much about it. He just told him that if he tries to contact Alina or go near Alina, to basically kill him. And so he continued on. And so now we're at the point where everybody's heading towards the ship. They're about to go, everybody's on the ship about to go through the fold to the crossing. And you see Kaz and Inej and Jesper, they're all dressed up and they fancy clothing, so they're now able to blend in with the dignitaries. And of course Jesper, he was like, you know what, if I die and you two survive, make sure I have an open casket. He's just a clown.
If I'm meant to die today and either of you two survive, make sure I have an open casket.
But then you get a glimpse of Maul. So Maul has been able to sneak onto the ship as well. We don't know how, but he's there. And the final scene is Alina. She's standing there. Of course, they're all on deck. And you see the ship enter into the fold. And that's how this episode ends. So I'm going to end this here. And I will talk to you guys later.